Number 9. Fred and Rosemary West. Rosemary Lutz was 15 years old when she met 27-year-old Fred West in 1969. Her parents opposed the relationship due to the massive age gap. But Rosemary moved into her older lover's Gloucestershire, England home, and the rest was history. When Fred was imprisoned for theft the following year, Rosemary found herself caring for their newborn and for Fred's 2 older children by another woman. Shortly before Fred's release in 1971, Rosemary murdered one of her stepdaughters, Charmaine. She told police that the young girl had gone to live with her biological mother. But Fred had already killed her biological mother, his first wife, and the pregnant mistress. This marked the beginning of a decades-long spree of unspeakable murders and sexual assaults, including against random victims and their own children. After Fred sexually abused his daughter Louise in 1992, the little girl reached out for help, sparking a police investigation. The kids were placed into foster care after they told social workers of the horrific abuse, including threats to kill and bury them beneath the patio, where their sister Heather had ended up. The couple told investors that Heather left voluntarily and that they had no idea where she was. But several children refused to testify, and they were acquitted of all charges. Detectives remained on the case, and when they announced plans to search the West Yard for Heather's remains, Fred confessed to her murder. Heather's remains bore signs of excruciating torture, including having her fingernails ripped off. Too cowardice to face the accountability for his actions, Fred committed suicide in prison while awaiting trial. Rose was found guilty on 10 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Some believe that the deranged couple killed as many as 60 people over their decades-long spree of perversion. Number 8. Gerald Gallego and Charlene Williams. Between 1978 and 1980, a married couple named Gerald and Charlene Gallego terrorized residents around Sacramento, California. They murdered at least 10 victims, who were mostly teenagers that the sadistic pair kept as sex slaves. Born to a sex worker and a career criminal, Gerald had a rough start to his life. He began sexually abusing others when he was just 13 years old, and ended up being married 7 different times. Charlene, on the other hand, came from a respectable background and a supportive home, but she began abusing drugs and alcohol at a young age, and things only spiraled downward from there. She complied with Gerald's sick desires when he began abducting girls to fulfill his sexual fantasies. The couple scoped out their victims at local shopping malls, where Charlene lured them to Gerald's van. In one of their most prolific murders, the pair forced a young couple named Craig Miller and Mary Elizabeth Showers into their car. They shot Miller dead and brought Showers back to their home, where they sexually abused her before taking her to a field and executing her. A friend of one of the victims took note of Gerald and Charlene's license plate numbers and reported them, leading to their arrest. Charlene claimed Gerald was solely responsible for the heinous crimes, but many believe that he never killed her because she complied, and that she was just as guilty as he was. Gerald died from cancer while awaiting his execution. Charlene spent 17 years behind bars and was released in 1997, thereafter changing her name and assuming a new identity to try and escape her dark past. When the media caught up to her, she maintained her claim that she, too, was a victim. Number 7. The Canon Barbie Killers. Paul Bernardo was an attractive and charming Scarborough, Ontario native who used his skills and looks to manipulate women. Unbeknownst to the local population at the time, he embarked on a series of violent crimes against women starting in 1987. He brutalized his victims for 5 years, and although Bernardo was questioned twice, he was never officially considered a suspect. The same year he started attacking women, he met Carla Homolka, an attractive blonde from a good family with a seemingly promising future. Their attraction was instant and magnetic, and as it turned out, Homolka had the same dark, twisted fantasies as her new lover. Homolka knew her boyfriend was sexually abusing women and was perfectly fine with it, and the couple eventually became engaged. But by then, Bernardo was getting bored. When he expressed a desire to victimize Homolka's 15-year-old sister Tammy, his fiancée dutifully went along with the sick plan, agreeing to secure her younger sister's virginity for him as a Christmas gift. During a family Christmas party, Homolka spiked Tammy's drinks with veterinary drugs, rendering her unconscious. Later that night, she and Bernardo videotaped themselves taking turns raping Tammy. The teen began choking on her own vomit, prompting the deranged couple to hide evidence and call 911. Tammy was pronounced dead at the hospital, and her death was ruled accidental due to alcohol poisoning despite a chemical burn on her face. Bernardo and Homolka continued their gruesome crimes, and they got married in the meantime. Police eventually traced multiple murders to the pair. After scrambling for a plea deal, Homolka served prison time and was released in 2005. Bernardo, on the other hand, was sentenced to life. He is eligible for parole, but has not received it as of yet. Hey, real quick, if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're liking this video, then please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and the subscribe button too if you haven't already. Number 6. The Lonely Hearts Killers. In 1947, single mother and Florida native Martha Beck met Raymond Fernandez through a singles ad she'd placed. The pair quickly became engaged, and soon enough, Beck abandoned her 2 children and appeared on her lover's New York City doorstep. Fernandez perceived Beck's willingness to leave her children as a sign of her devotion to him. She soon began aiding him in a series of sick crimes, murdering at least 3 people in 1949 alone, including a toddler. Dubbed the Lonely Hearts Killers, the pair used singles ads to lure and kill lonely women, with Beck sometimes posing as Fernandez's sister to make the situation seem safe. Armed with a violent and jealous temper, Beck tried to stop Fernandez from going all the way with his victims. When it happened, she unleashed her fury on both parties. At one point, Beck caught Fernandez in bed with a woman named Janet Faye and bludgeoned her with a hammer. Fernandez then brutally strangled the 66-year-old. During their criminal free-for-all, the couple met and stayed with 28-year-old single mother Delphine Downing near Grand Rapids, Michigan. Fernandez drugged Downing, who fell into an obvious state of stupor, causing her toddler to become alarmed. Set off by the child's crying, Beck drowned the little one, and Fernandez shot Downing to death. They buried the bodies in the basement. Concerned neighbors summoned police to the household, and the pair was arrested. Fernandez confessed, but later retracted his confession. Law enforcement connected the pair to 17 murders altogether, but they were only ever tried for Janet Faye's murder, for which they were convicted and sentenced to death. Beck and Fernandez were executed on March 8th of 1951. Number 5. Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate met when he was 18 and she was just 13. Starkweather committed his first murder the following year in 1957. When a gas station clerk refused to sell him a stuffed toy for Carol that he couldn't afford. His life derailed from there when he lost his job and couldn't pay his rent. While the exact details are murky, Starkweather went to Fugate's house one night and killed her mother, stepfather, and baby sister. The couple continued to live in the house for several days among the decomposing bodies, with a sign on the front door saying they had the flu to deter visitors from prying. By the time Fugate's grandmother became suspicious and called the police, the pair had fled to a Nebraska farm and killed the owner. They then murdered a teenage couple they had hitched a ride with and continued their killing spree from there. The couple's disturbing activities led to a full-scale manhunt and an eventual surrender to police. At first, Fugate was framed as just another of Starkweather's victims, but it eventually became clear she was a willing accomplice. Starkweather was sentenced to death and was executed the following year. Fugate received a life sentence because she could have left her lover several times and chose not to, which was perceived as a reflection of her guilt. She was released for good behavior in 1976 after serving 17 years, but was denied a pardon. Number 4. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Between July 1963 and October of 1965, a British couple named Ian Brady and Myra Hindley committed a series of killings known as the Moors murders. Their victims were all very young, and at least 4 of them were sexually assaulted. The pair met in 1961 through work, where Hindley became enamored with Brady, who already had an extensive criminal record containing dozens of burglary and assault charges. The couple developed a sick obsession with reading Nazi propaganda and entertaining fantasies of Aryan perfection, prompting Hindley to bleach her hair and change her wardrobe. They also enjoyed renting books about crime and torture from the library and reportedly planned robberies together, which never came to fruition. Hindley would later recall that Brady began fantasizing about committing the perfect murder in 1963. The couple killed their first victim, 16-year-old Pauline Reedy, in July of that year. They sexually abused and beat her and then buried her in a shallow grave, before moving on to their next target and killing him in a similar fashion. The couple also rented a van and robbed a few banks. Brady's brother-in-law, David Smith, reported the pair to police after witnessing the murder of a 17-year-old firsthand. Officers initially only arrested Brady on suspicion of murder, but soon charged Hindley as well. Both received life sentences and expressed remorse, with Hindley largely blaming Brady for the crimes. She died of pneumonia in 2002 at the age of 60, and Brady was locked in a mental institution until his death in 2017. Number 3. Ray and Faye Copeland. Ray Copeland met and married Faye Wilson in 1940 after serving a prison sentence for fraud. His record made it difficult for the farmer to purchase cattle, so he began taking in drifters and employing them as farmhands at his Mooresville, Missouri property. He had them buy cattle using phony checks. After being released, Copeland resumed his criminal activities and was repeatedly thrown into jail throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. He and his wife eventually became partners in crime, setting up vagabonds to buy cattle with forged checks and then shooting them after the transactions were over. This went on for decades, with the couple committing at least 5 murders before they were finally caught in 1989, when one of their employees saw human bones on their property. Faye claimed that Ray had abused her for the better part of 50 years in hopes of copping a plea deal, but her efforts failed. The pair became the oldest couple ever sentenced to death in 1993 at the ages of 69 and 76. Ray died on death row of natural causes that year. Faye's sentence was commuted to life, and she passed away in 2002 from a stroke, just months after being paroled into hospice care. Number 2. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown. Alton Coleman was a middle school dropout born in 1955 to a mother who worked 3 jobs in Waukegan, Illinois. She was no stranger to the law, having been charged with sex crimes 6 times between 1973 and 1983 alone, and never held a steady job. In 1984, Coleman went on a months-long crime spree throughout the American Midwest with his girlfriend, Deborah Brown. Altogether, the couple committed 8 murders, 7 sexual assaults, 3 kidnappings, and 14 armed robberies. Their first known murder victim was a 9-year-old girl from Kenosha, Wisconsin, named Vernita Wheat. The pair then proceeded to Gary, Indiana, where they abducted 2 girls aged 7 and 9. One managed to escape, but the other was choked to death. Soon enough, the FBI was all over Coleman and Brown, even creating an 11th spot on its 10 most wanted list to draw attention to the couple. But they managed to evade authorities for 53 days while continuing along their path of destruction. Finally, a childhood friend recognized Coleman and the police apprehended the pair at an Illinois park. They were both sentenced to death, and Coleman was executed in Ohio in 2002. Brown's sentence was commuted to life due to her low IQ, despite initially showing no remorse for her crimes, and nobody ever determined their motive for committing these disturbing acts. Number 1. David and Catherine Burney. Catherine Harrison left her husband and 6 children to be with David Burney, whom she had met years earlier when she was just 12 years old. The two eventually married, and in 1986 they embarked on a murderous crime spree, killing all but one of their 5 known victims. They drove around the city of Perth in Western Australia, searching for women who were alone. Catherine lured the unsuspecting victim into the vehicle, who was then taken to the couple's home and tortured. Chained to the bed, the unfortunate target would be sexually abused and killed by David, while Catherine cheered her husband on. The law finally caught up with the couple when their final victim, 17-year-old Kate Moore, escaped after the Burneys abducted her at knife point. While Catherine tended to a drug deal at the front door, having forgotten to chain her victim to the bed, Kate broke the lock on a window and climbed out. She then ran to a nearby vacuum cleaner store, where the shop owner called the police. The couple was arrested and David confessed, revealing the location of 4 graves in their yard. They both received 4 life sentences. David committed suicide in prison in 2005. Burney remains in prison, but some, including her youngest son, who claims he was assaulted because of who his mother is, don't think the sentence is harsh enough and have called for her execution. Thanks for watching. What do you think of these evil couples? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.